Well, this morning we are delighted to have back with us Mitch Austin, our California disciple out there. And Mitch is blaming me for the talk title today, but I deny any choice in that matter. But he's going to be talking to us about how things are changing and how we find stability within the change. And we are familiar with Mitch. He's been with us many times before. He's was raised in the science of mind philosophy and has been involved with the Centers for Spiritual Living as a licensed practitioner. And he's got some exciting news of some potential new gigs coming his way. And he recently got engaged. So we've got a lot to talk about. Hey, Mitch, you're on.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that introduction, and so grateful to be with the center once again on this Easter Sunday. Good morning, everyone. So happy to see you. And I want to say happy Easter, happy Passover, happy Ostara. There's a lot of holidays around this time of year as we move from the dark back to the light, as the days become lighter. You know, so many of these ancient traditions are steeped in the agricultural cycles of the earth, which at one point we were very dependent on. We got really excited when we knew we could grow vegetables again. Like, and we could plant seeds and we could have more light. And it is definitely a time of celebration and transformation. When anything new is coming into our experience, with this newness, with this growth, comes change. And there's been a lot of change, particularly in the last 5 years. Anybody getting change exhaustion from the last 5 years? Locally, I mean, in our world, even in our country, we're seeing things change on a level some things we never thought that would. Things like Roe versus Wade being overturned, or a domestic attack on our capital. We've also seen some good things, more women in political offices and positions of power than we've seen in our history. We've also seen massive shifts in terms of racial equity and a healing going on in many areas of our world, in our culture, that need to happen. And worldwide, we've seen a lot of change. Of course, the pandemic, there's like a pre-world, remember 2019, and then 2020, like nothing was the same after that, right? There's pre-pandemic world and post-pandemic world. We're also seeing global refugees fleeing from conflict, poverty, climate change. We're seeing climate change on a level we haven't experienced in recent times. Also, the introduction of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency, and what is all this stuff, right? A lot of change. In fact, they say in the next 5 years, we're going to see more change than we've seen in the last 30. In the last 30. So what's going on? Something's up. We know something's up. And you might be asking, where is God in all this shift? And that's the title of today's talk. We're going to talk about, through a spiritual lens, through a divine mind lens, what's actually happening and what's ours to do as this unfolds, so we can move through it intentionally. We know in many of the spiritual teachings that everything is a thought before it's a thing, and that all our thoughts collect in something called the collective mind, and that outpictures our world. So in all this change and all this shift, how can we move through it in a way to create a more intentional world? Because that's what's happening. We have new growth. We have a new world that's being born, and we get to be a part of it. And many people are throwing around the term apocalypse. It's the apocalypse. But it is the apocalypse, but not in the way we might think. The word apocalypse actually comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means unveiling, revelation. And metaphysically speaking, what we're talking about is a profound unveiling of hidden truths, of spiritual insights, of divine knowledge. We're seeing a convergence of science and spirituality, right? We're seeing hidden truths in our culture and beliefs and thoughts and ways of being that people have had, patterns that they've had that haven't necessarily been helpful or positive. We call some of those things cognitive biases or microaggressions. Like we're learning more about us than we ever have. And some of the views that we have around this change feels like it's a catastrophe, like the world is ending. A world is ending, but it's a paradigm of thought. It's a way of being. It's the old institutions are breaking apart and falling away. We're seeing a transformational process of enlightenment and shift in every area of our being, and all three facets of existence that we would call mind, body, and spirit. We're seeing a revolution of mind and thinking in ways we haven't seen in millennia. We're talking about mental health now. We're talking about the mind-body connection. We're talking about the power of the mind to heal and to change physical matter. We're talking about now our bodies and how our bodies are changing. We're seeing more expression of people and the way they use their bodies and how they represent their gender and gender fluidity or no gender or transgender. We're seeing a lot of different expression of being. And we're talking more about spirit and spiritual principles. Anybody ever get on TikTok? Any TikTokers here? I invite you to get on there and to type in spiritual TikTok, and you're going to see 20 somethings talking about meditation, talking about law of mind, talking about the tree of life. There's this explosion of interest and focus in spirituality. So we're seeing a shift on every level, and God's in it all, right? It's a triune nature to God. It's the spirit of the unseen. It's the mind that can be intentionally create in the unseen and create a container. And then it's the manifestation or the body. So we're seeing this birth of a new world in all three areas. And this birth, we're now participating in. It's the collective that we get to upload our intention, our focus, our hopes for this new paradigm that's being born into our experience, to this God-centered world, the grand organizing designer working through us and as us, because we're the designers, right? God can only do for us what God can do through us. We are the hands, the heart, the mind of the divine in the world. And in all of this shift and change and all of this explosion of variety and all of this differentiation is what's happening, right? Things that used to be A or B have now A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Remember when there was only like the Republican and Democrat Party? Well, now there's facets within those. And the Freedom Party started to come up, and populism is rising. Like all of this explosion in our political arena, all of this explosion in culture, all of this explosion in spiritual belief systems can create a sense of splitting apart or division. And our challenge is to remember that even in all of our variety, even in all of our different expressions and beliefs, that we're all one. We're all cells in a body called humanity. And so that's our challenge, is to heal this divide as we go through the birth canal so we come out in one piece, which would be great. That's what we want, right? I want to offer you some wisdom from Reverend Dr. Temple Hayes, who's with the Association for Global New Thought. Dr. Hayes says, It's time to step up, not down. We can only start where we are in the decisions we make and live right now. Dr. Hayes encourages us to heal the divide within you. And over time, the divide will heal within all of us. We are not broken. The world is not broken. And until we mend the deep misunderstanding within our psyche, we will always allow the lesser to guide us. Simply put, we need to remain united, because when we're divided, fear, the lesser, can start to control the narrative, can start to control where we put our thoughts, where we put our energy, where we put our action. Because we're in the process. We're in the birth canal. We're shifting to higher ground. And God is the process. Spirit is guiding the process. And we are guiding the what. What is being born, right? Because in law of mind, we know we determine our what, we put our intention, we create the container, and spirit creates the how, goes through the process for things to be born. So our work is to trust this process, as scary, as twisted and turny and up and downy as it can look to our human mind. There's a divine process playing out. And there are three parts I want to talk about in this process today. The first is what I call the illumination, or the clarity. We're starting to see things we just didn't know. We didn't know about the God particle, right? We didn't know that there's something called microaggressions. We didn't know cognitive bias. There's a lot of things we just didn't know. That our political system could be manipulated through the internet, and that there's all these forces, right? But as we begin to see, we can begin to shift. We can begin to transmute what is into something better, because you can't change what you can't see. So that's the first step. Of course, the second is the transmutation, the change, the shifting, the remaking. And then once you've went through that, then there's the emergence, the new. And with that, you get new powers, new freedoms, and you also get new responsibilities. So let's talk about the first part, the illumination, the clarity. Once we see something, we can't unsee it, right? Once we have clarity, it moves providence. It begins to determine the course of events automatically, because we're walking around in a presence that's responsive to what we see and what we know. We've all experienced this in our life. Who's ever been in a friendship or a love relationship and you just knew it was over? Like when you know it's, you can't unknow it. And then it starts to move how things unfold. Or maybe you knew it was time to change careers or retire, right? Or stop an unhealthy behavior. When we come to that level of knowing and clarity, it's like it's already done. It's just the conditions got to catch up. And when we collectively see things, like when we collectively saw what happened to George Floyd, we couldn't unsee it. And we had to address it. What was behind that? And what's going on in our world that would allow that to happen? And we have so much of that clarity coming through in every facet of our society that it feels like a lot. And a lot is going on. And we've had this illumination or clarity lead to some really important and good things that have come out of some things that didn't feel so good. For instance, COVID didn't feel good. But we realized our interconnectivity, just how much we can affect our collective health individually and relationally. We also discovered how much we miss socializing and hugging and seeing our friends, and how important socialization is. We also gain the opportunity now to learn how to work from home. For those of us who are still working now, remote work is a thing. and people can spend more time with their families and less time commuting and affecting the environment. We also saw some things that helped us grow in social equity and policy making and helping people who've been oppressed for a long time. And we're having more discussions about isms, all of them, including ageism, fatism, neurodivergentism, right? We're beginning to see our differences more granularly and how sometimes those differences are helpful or not. But see, all of this divine discontent is pulling us forward because Spirit knows us. Spirit's met us human beings, right? We're pushed by pain until we're pulled by vision, right? It's a tool for us to wake up and be uncomfortable enough to change because change is uncomfortable, even the good change. But we've got to see it first. Many of you know, or fun fact if you don't, I'm a transgender man. And I was recently on a podcast and I was asked about my opinion about all the laws that are going on, and some of them are discriminatory against transgender people and what I thought about it. And I said, well, I actually think it's part of the healing, that people need to struggle with really hard questions to gain understanding. And until we're seen, we can't be understood. And if we're not understood, we can't be included authentically. And I just see it as part of the process of us all gaining understanding. Now, it may look really ugly and unelegant at times, but I accept that we all have to get there together, all of us, not just part of us. And it takes time. It takes the struggle. It takes some missteps. Sometimes it even takes some really hard and difficult conversations. But I see it as a signpost towards healing and not necessarily something to fear. And I hope that as you see things that are shifting and changing that feel hard or feel like they're going in the wrong direction, I encourage you to keep the high watch. That even though it seems like it's something that's meant for our harm, that it can be transmuted to something that's used for good. A great example of this is during the Cold War, we saw lots of technology come out for weapons of mass destruction. Ugh, nobody wants that. But from those technologies, we saw a lot of good technologies come forward. Computers, internet, global positioning system, you know, the one on your phone or in your car, that all came out of the Cold War. Water purification, even CAT scans, and so many more things. You know, it's all part of the transformation. What we know must break apart for the new to be born. And we all know the wonderful example of that is the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It goes into the cocoon and it turns to goo. Well, that's where we're at. We're in the goo phase and we're creating something new. And that goo is actually contains now something called imaginal cells. Isn't that cool? Imaginal cells. And we're seeing an explosion of imagination and creation on an unprecedented level. But it can feel hard. And we can feel like we're in the dark and can feel like we don't know what we are or what we're becoming. But the good news is, even though the world as we know it is falling away, that it had to fall away, it had to end because there were some things that weren't sustainable. Let's be honest, you know, and we've seen this before. We've seen worlds fall away before. You know, I was in the kitchen with my fiance yesterday, and she was quoting an old-timey magazine that had the top 10 tips about how to keep your husband happy. You know, your hair has to be a certain way and all that. And I was kind of laughing, going, maybe we could bring that back since we're getting married. But it had to fall away, right? There needs to be equity and balance of power in relationships in some fashion for things to be harmonious and for whole people to be in relationship. So we've seen old things fall away. There used to be ads that said, give your children Coca-Cola, it's good for your babies. Like all of this stuff, we can see old paradigms and thoughts that we look back now and go, of course we shouldn't have been doing that. And someday we will look back at all these shifts and changes and know why that world happened. Because we move in cycles. The divine unfolding happens in patterns and cycles. All of life has a pattern. If we look at fractal patterns, for instance, we'll see them in all of life, playing out in different forms, that same intelligence repeating itself. Even our own bodies go through cycles. We replace our skin every 30 days, and we don't consciously do that. Right? There's a power for good that's doing that on our behalf. We don't even know it's going on. And this divine design evolution has cycles as well. There's cycles of history. There's a great book Doug and I were talking about called The Fourth Turning, that there's 4 parts to a whole turning of a cycle. And one way to look at this cycle is the role that we play and how we develop under pressure. It's said that bad times create strong and resilient people. And those strong and resilient people do the hard things that create good times. But the good times tend to create soft people who maybe aren't as prudent or cautious. And that can create bad times. And then those bad times then again create strong people. We see this play out in the generational patterns, right? The silent generation that went through the war and had to be frugal, they were cautious and they were frugal. They made it through those bad times because they gained that resilience. And then we had good times, right? Good times. We had people owning houses and everyone had jobs, right? And in came the boomers, all the babies were being born. Everyone was beginning to be optimistic, right? So we had the boomers and the Gen Xers, and we were more gung-ho. We were out there spending money and having a good time and enjoying life, right? Because that's what we want. We want a good life. But the national debt got out of control. Now there's some inflammation. And so now inflation, it feels like inflammation, doesn't it? Inflation. And our millennials are graduating, way over their heads in college debt and can't buy a home. And same with our Gen Xers, right? So now they're experiencing hard times. And the Gen Zs, which are the 10 to 20-year-olds, are being born into pandemic, right? Wars, climate change, inflation, high interest rates. Maybe their parents aren't owning their homes and they're talking about, having to cut back on expenses. So now these Gen Zers, these 10 to 20-year-olds are cautious, practical, resourceful, frugal. Many of them don't want to adult. They say it's hard. And it is, right? From their perspective. Some aren't even getting their driver's license. Young males aren't really looking and females aren't looking to get married or have kids. They're putting it off. So we're seeing the cycles play through again. And in these cycles, we're now starting to see the emergence of a new earth. Who read Eckhart Tolle's New Earth? Great book, huh? Well, definitely the book was signaling us that something was coming. And now we're in the something. And in this change, in this shift, we actually moved, if you follow any of the astrological cycles, we moved from the Piscean age pretty squarely into the age of Aquarius, right? The Piscean age was the age of water, right? Things don't move as fast. Age of emotion, a lot of emotion. We would measure twice and cut once in the Piscean age, right? But in the age of the Aquarius, in air, you move quicker. You just move fast. You just build the plane while you're flying it. Anyone ever hear that? You just build the plane while you're flying. We'll just throw out the beta version and see what happens, right? That's the age we're in. And it's hard for us in the Piscean age. We're like, why didn't we do it right and test it before we, that's not the world we're in anymore. It's moving very quickly. And we see it in the massive digital transformation, the interconnectivity of the globe. We've got people in the Sahara and the bush with cell phones, right? Being able to sell the things they just made. Like, where did that happen? We're seeing environmental awareness and sustainability on a whole nother level. I've now gained a third garbage can for food waste. Anybody got food waste garbage can? Right? Environmental awareness up to here. I am no longer allowed to use paper towels in my house. So Karen has informed me of that. I now have little like squares of, it's hard, but I see why. We're seeing political polarization and populism, demographic shifts. We're going to have more centurions than we have had in decades, hundreds of years. I am now working with a company that has 5 generations working together under one roof. How do we connect? How do we talk to each other? How do we see each other? Being that our world experience has been so different. All of this is coming together to birth a new world. And we get to participate. We get to be part of this new emergence as we get new powers, new understanding, as we get to see and know more about ourselves, our world, and what is possible. So we need to ask the question, in all of this birthing of the new world, what is ours to do? And I want to offer a little wisdom from Gandhi. And here's what Gandhi says. Gandhi says, we but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendency in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme, a wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do. We need not see to wait and see what others do. So as we move through all this shift, what are some things we can focus on? Well, first and foremost, I think our biggest challenge is to remain united, to heal any appearance of divide, either within ourselves or externally. I remember when Trump first ran for president against Hillary, and my long lost brother, who I had just connected with a few years earlier, and I loved dearly and think the world of him, started posting all of this stuff about Trump that I didn't believe, that felt very dividing. Like, could I love him and know his heart, and yet he was saying this? Like, it felt like all of a sudden I didn't know him. I felt like I had to choose my belief system or the love for my brother. But I have to remember, it's not either or, it's both and. He's still the same person who cried for 6 months after his ferret died, that raises parrots, that loves animals. Like, there's still the heart there. There's just a difference in this area. Am I going to let that color our whole relationship, or am I going to remember our humanity? And that's really the work. It's up to us to put our humanity first as we birth. If we want it in the new earth, we got to focus on it and we got to live it, so that it comes through the birth canal with us. We can also remember to stay out of fear and in faith, to not participate in the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's called FUD. Don't participate in the FUD. No FUD, right? Neighbor comes to you to tell you how awful something is. Give some words of encouragement. Don't participate. Don't reinforce that. It's all going up into the one mind. It's going to come through the birth canal, right? It's up to us to be, do, and say what we want to be part of this new earth. Because God can only do for us what God can do through us. So let us remember the world is not broken. There are some beliefs about the world that need to be shifted, transmuted, healed, understood, walked through. And we all have a part to play, to be the love, to be the healing, to be the change we want in this new world, and that our consciousness counts, that it's added to the whole, that we keep the faith as things continue to accelerate. And I want to leave you with a beautifully written piece by Wendell Berry as you feel this change, exhaustion, and stress from all of this movement and tension. It's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lay down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Blessed be. Let us just take a collective breath in, staying in that one mind, that one love, that one power. And just allowing ourselves to be fully present in it, as it, knowing that we are each an ambassador of the divine on the planet, the hands of God, the heart of God, the mind of God. And breathe. For there is only one life. One life. Many pieces, many parts, many expressions. All part of the tapestry of the one life. And that life is God's life, Spirit's life, the divine's life. And in that high view of the one life, that life is perfect. It's perfect healing, it's perfect revealing, it's perfect unfolding. All matter of perfection playing out at the highest view of spirit. And that life is my life now. No matter what it looks like to my human mind, this perfect life, breathing me, moving me, prodding me, comforting me, directing me, sourcing with every heartbeat, with every breath. So I give thanks for this one beautiful life and its thread being woven into the tapestry called humanity. As only I can weave it, as only I can think it, as only I can do it. And so I remind myself that we walk through shadows to move to the light and to be changed by it in a new way, a brave way, a faithful way, an expectant way of good, of great, joy, love, harmony, peace, and prosperity. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, God.